Good morning, everyone. Now we will learn about VV ECMO, which stands for Veno-Venous ECMO. As Dr. Goel has shared with you, there are two types of ECMO, veno-venous and veno-arterial. The objective of this talk is to discuss the pathophysiology and physiology of veno-venous ECMO, describe the indications for the veno-venous support, why do we call it as a veno-venous, outline the evaluation of referrals for veno-venous ECMO, and understand the management of veno-venous ECMO in brief. In principle, veno-venous support has got lower mortality than veno-arterial ECMO. As you understand, veno-venous means we drain blood from a venous source and again re-infuse the oxygenated blood back to the venous source as well. So it reaches the systemic circulation through the natural mechanism, through the natural pathway. It has lower complication rates compared to veno-arterial ECMO. There are thromboembolic, neurological, and limb ischemia sort of problems, which are seen more often with veno-arterial than with the veno-venous. And survival rate has been high in VV ECMO compared to VA ECMO. In neonates, it is anywhere between 75 to 90%, depending on the centers. In pediatrics, roughly around 65%, and in adult population, around 60%. This is depending on the cumulative data from the Health Registry Organization. So in both the types of ECMO, as we come across, veno-venous modality is more often needed. It depends on the pathology as well. We look at the needs of the individual patient and then we select which type of ECMO is needed in the particular circumstances. For example, if it is only respiratory failure with the heart function being okay, that is one of the common indications for going on to veno-venous support. There are hard data available with conventional, especially in case of neonatal acute respiratory failure. And with respect to the adults, CSER trial has been done after 2005. The results are a little bit controversial as some of the conventionally treated patients in ECMO criteria or as per the ECMO criteria were also added to the ECMO limb. That's why some people consider it as controversial, but it is a positive trial anyway. H1N1 established veno-venous ECMO in the adult practice, and more so currently as we are seeing in COVID-19 ECMO, 95% of these patients with the COVID-19 pneumonia, they have been needing veno-venous support only. Unfortunately, the success rate is a bit low worldwide with the veno-venous ECMO in COVID-19, around 50% as the success rate. This is when mortality is 100%. Now, veno-venous adults is fast growing ECMO group in the ECMO community, and veno-venous neonates are declining with advanced conventional support, more so in the Western world, as nitric oxide, high frequency oscillation, modalities like this, they have been helping in kids getting better sooner. The physiology of VV ECMO, as you know, it involves venous blood from the patient being accessed from the large central veins, that is the access line, and it is returned to the venous system near the right atrium via the return line. After it passes through the oxygenator and the gas exchange happens. It provides support for severe respiratory failure when no major cardiac dysfunction happens. Even if there is a minimal dysfunction also, VV ECMO is going to be helpful. I will show that in the next slide. When the flow through a single access cannula is insufficient to support the high ECMO flow rate needed, further venous access cannula may be required, and this is what we call it as a hybrid mode of ECMO. So here you are seeing a single cannula in the right atrium, but this is a double lumen cannula. As you're seeing here, there are two lumens in the same cannula, which is in it. This is a single lumen, but the way it is inserted is really beautiful. As you can see, the holes from the tip of the cannula are draining the venous blood flow from the inferior vena cava, that is the blood coming from the lower part of the body, and the holes from the superior vena cava region here are draining blood from the superior vena cava here. That is the blood coming from the venous, from the upper limbs, brain, etc. So this blood will be going through the ECMO tubings now to the oxygenator to get purified. And once gas exchange takes place, the oxygenated blood, as indicated as red here, will be coming back to the right atrium, which is devoid of venous blood mostly, as it is already sucked at SVC end and IVC end. So this is the principle behind veno-venous ECMO. The arterial blood or the oxygenated blood, which is returned into the right atrium, it goes through the natural pathway via right ventricle to the pulmonary circulation and gets distributed further. So this is mostly done in the adults when you are using two different cannulae at two different sites. Superior vena cava cannula here at the tip here, and another one in the inferior vena cava here. So from the IVC cannula, it tends to drain the blood as the access line here goes through ECMO pump, oxygenator, and from there arterial blood, oxygenated blood, I should call it the oxygenated blood, is returned into the right atrium via the superior vena cava here. So it is possible that there might be some recirculation happening here that cannot be completely excluded. So this is a two-site veno-venous ECMO cannulation. Okay, in this one through the femoral vein into the IVC region here, and the return cannula in the SVC via internal jugular vein. Let us look at the hybrid circulation. How does it exist? Like a VVV ECMO circuit. Here, blood is drained from the femoral via the femoral vein in the lower part of the IVC here to the internal iliac system here, and also from the internal jugular vein, blood is drained here. This is the source of blood supply going through the pump onto the oxygenator, because if you need more oxygenation, then you have to send more blood through the ECMO circuit and the oxygenator. So it goes through the heat exchanger here and it returns to the other side into the femoral vein as well here. Here red indicates oxygenated blood. So this is the circuit diagram for one of the hybrid modes of ECMO. Thus, the physiology of VV ECMO is it improves patient's oxygenation, and as oxygenation is the most important thing which helps the tissues in getting normal circulation returned, normal functions returned. So that's how the oxygenated blood returning to the patient will be distributed to the various tissues, and it helps the tissues. It removes carbon dioxide from the patient blood and allows ventilatory support to be reduced, which reduces ventilator-induced lung injury, which tends to happen by various means. So what about minimal cardiac dysfunction? We have shown that by providing oxygenated blood supply to the heart, even in veno-venous ECMO, it improves the myocardial contractility due to improved myocardial oxygenation. But thereby reducing high ventilatory settings, it improves the RV preload as well. And it also reduces pulmonary vascular resistance and RV afterload. So by these different means, we should be able to wean the inotropes, especially when they are minimal to moderate inotropic requirement. In case of VV ECMO for respiratory failure in inotropic dependent neonates, we proved it and we published it in ASAO journal in 2005 at that time. So oxygen consumption wise, neonates need around 5 to 8 ml per kilo per minute, children need around 4 to 6 ml per kilo per minute, and adults need 3 to 5 ml per kilo per minute. You can extrapolate this in terms of the body weight at different ages too. Oxygenation or oxygen consumption will be reduced by rest, giving paralytic agents, and allowing moderate hypothermia. Oxygen consumption increases by increasing the muscular activity, infection, hyperthermia, increased levels of catecholamines, and hyperthyroidism status. Here you see an approximate guidance for the type, for the size of cannula needed for the drainage cannula and return cannula at different age groups. The vessel should be able to accommodate these cannulae of different sizes at these particular age groups. So once ECMO is initiated, VV ECMO, the flow should be initiated over 20 to 30 minutes slowly. Initial flow is around 20 cc per kilo per minute. Taking as fresh blood as possible would be helpful to avoid hyperkalemia, as hyperkalemia in the blood itself can cause cardiac arrest in some situations. Target the flow to 120 to 150 cc per kilo per minute in children, and up to 3 to 4 liters in adults, if that is enough for satisfying the needs of gas exchange, as well as bringing the lactate down. Do not wean the ventilator settings immediately, but wait until full flow is achieved. At that time, you try to reduce ventilator settings. The sweep gas flow to ECMO flow, the ratio, there is adjustment is done according to this following formula. Titrate the patient, start with the 1:1 ratio, the flow to sweep gas. Sweep gas is the oxygen supply going through the circuit, as you know by now. So the oxygen circuit, and that is a gas flow to the ECMO blood flow maintains a ratio 0.5 to 1 to 2 to 1. Don't exceed that. Otherwise, it can cause air embolism. The goals are saturation should be maintained above 90% if possible, but if not, above 85%. Accept low saturations if you cannot achieve higher saturations. Look at other correctable parameters as well, like hemoglobin low, etc., might be made better by blood transfusions. It is important to maintain oxygen delivery to the tissue, but not exactly the PO2 as such. In this process, the lactate will help you as a surrogate, either as a single value at that point of time, as well as the trend of lactate. That is also important for you to see how your patient is doing. Carbon dioxide, 40 to 45 is the average range, and in hemoglobin, 10 to 12 grams per deciliter, that is maintainable while on ECMO, especially in the initial part of ECMO. Later on, if the patient is stable at 7 grams per deciliter or so, we tend to accept that, provided tissue oxygenation is met with. The indications for VV ECMO are commonly viral pneumonias, as you're seeing these days. Very recently, it was H1N1, and now it is COVID-19, both being viral pneumonias. Bacterial pneumonias, ARDS, following trauma, burns, aspiration, drowning, etc. These are the other indications too. Cardiac causes, usually they need veno-arterial ECMO, but if it is only the lung support that is needed, once the heart has recovered, in that case, veno-arterial ECMO from before can be converted into veno-venous ECMO, just to providing the lung support after recovery of the heart. So in hybrid modes also, this could be employed. So there are certain differences between veno-arterial versus veno-venous ECMO. Veno-venous is mainly for respiratory failure, whereas veno-arterial is for cardiac and or respiratory failure. If they are combined together or only cardiac, then veno-arterial ECMO. In veno-arterial ECMO, it is vein to artery, and in veno-venous, vein to vein. Decannulation may require arterial ligation or repair, so this is a surgical procedure, whereas veno-venous, it is simply catheter removal and can be done by non-surgeons as well. The pump flow is usually 80 to 100 ml per kilo per minute, and it is higher in case of veno-venous ECMO, 120 to 150 ml per kilo per minute. Similarly, oxygen delivery as well, the cardiac output plus pump delivery that will provide the oxygen here. Whereas in veno-venous, it is simply the native cardiac support which provides oxygenation. Okay, so minimal inotropes may be needed here to keep the heart driving. The indications for veno-venous ECMO are acute respiratory failure meeting the set criteria. In neonates, we tend to decide it as per the oxygenation index. I will deal with that in the next few slides. And in children as well as in adults, we go by Murray criteria. The other criteria like PF ratio, CO2 retention, and individually looking at the whole patient, the way they are deteriorating, that determines the need for ECMO. The other indications for respiratory ECMO or VV ECMO are severe air leaks, which are difficult to be maintained with multiple chest drains and ventilatory support, hypothermia, conversion to VA support from VA support when the lungs are still poorly, viable circulation including moderate inotropic requirements, and reversible pathology exit strategy in those cases. Veno-venous ECMO will be needed. When are the contraindications? When should we not do veno-venous ECMO? Irreversible pathology, the end result that is not in favor of recovery and you're dealing with an irreversible pathology. So in those cases, we don't want to put the patient on ECMO. Poor prognosis such as malignancy, immunosuppressive states, but this is a relative criteria, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, if there is a significant impact on the brain, like cerebral palsy, etc., in those cases. Cerebral hemorrhage or infarction, prematurity less than 34 weeks, here the vessel size tends to be smaller as well, in addition to increased possibility of intraventricular hemorrhages below 32 weeks gestation. Less than 2 kilos, again, central ECMO is possible, but here vessel sizes could be quite small. Circulatory failure with high inotropic requirement, then obviously veno-arterial ECMO would be needed in those cases. Unrepaired congenital cardiac disease, relative cases like obesity, advanced age, multi-system organ failure, long ventilation, etc. But these are relative contraindications. Even in unrepaired congenital cardiac disease also, it is relative. Sometimes for stabilizing the patient before optimizing for a definitive procedure, in those cases, you can still use venous ECMO for stabilization sake. The referral criteria are ventilation history, what have been tried already, high frequency oscillation, nitric oxide, prone positioning, etc. in case of neonates. In adults, certainly prone position and how much ventilation you are using them, especially the high pressure ventilation and high FiO2 ventilation. Cardiovascular status, including echo, fluid balance, the cumulative fluid balance should be towards negative. Neurological state, normal function is ideal. CT scan, MR scans may be needed at times. In neonates, cranial ultrasound scans. Concomitant organ failure, because with multi-organ failure, the chances of success will go down. Coagulation parameters, ideally it should be normal, but even if they are abnormal also, we tend to put them by not giving too much heparin. So for that reason, you need to know coagulation parameters before going on to ECMO. Metabolic states such as lactate, base deficit, nutrition, etc. are important. Height, weight, and body mass index. So Murray score. We have been talking about Murray score as one of the important factors determining the need for going on to ECMO. Murray score is an important criteria here, as you see on this table. There are 4 different criteria, such as chest X-ray. How many quadrants on the chest X-ray are infiltrated? That gives the score of 1, 2, 3, 4. So here it is 1 quadrant to 4 quadrants like this. Similarly, PaO2 by FiO2 ratios of different numbers, they give you certain score. PEEP, when it is more than 15, they get a score of 4. And here the compliance at certain value, they get a certain score here. So you combine all the scores from these 4 criteria and divide by 4. If it is more than 3, definitely it is an indication to go on to ECMO. ECLS should be considered when the risk of mortality is 50% or greater and is indicated when the risk is 80% or greater. So this is considered when it is mortality around 50% or greater, but definitely indicated when it is more than 80%. PaCO2 more than 80 or inability to achieve safe inflation pressure is an indication for ECLS. You see this mostly in case of asthma, etc., or in type 2 respiratory failure. Severe air leak syndromes are also an indication, as we discussed. Oxygenation index is mean airway pressure times FiO2 divided by PaO2 in millimeters of mercury. When it is more than 35 or more than 40, it becomes an indication for ECMO. And when the patients are on inhaled nitric oxide, you tend to add a factor of 10 to the oxygenation index score you achieve by this criteria. ARDS in children and adults as well. The mortality is higher in adults with ARDS compared to children, and the drop in PaO2 by FiO2 ratio of more than 100 in 12 hours, that is also another poor prognostic factor. So we consider referral of a patient for putting on ECMO when the criteria are met, including reversibility and the exit criteria, like it should be reversible condition. Conventional treatment is optimized, transferable or conventional ventilation, or the patient needs mobile ECMO. This has to be determined. ECMO physician opinion is needed here. So we make a combined decision here with the referral center and the referring center, both the physicians talking together, reviewing the patient criteria. We make a collective decision. Mobile ECMO deployment may be needed if transferring the patient on conventional means is not ideal. So in summary, adult VV ECMO, it is a growing area. We're seeing more and more cases, more and more adults being put on VV ECMO as a result of failure of conventional management. Outcomes are better than veno-arterial ECMO, and the inotropic requirement is not a contraindication. Minimal inotropic requirement, moderate inotropic requirement, still they can cope with that, provided the myocardial oxygenation is met with after going on to ECMO. Evaluate referral systematically and deploy early for maximal benefit. That is important. So ideally, patients can go on to ECMO when the duration of ventilation is less than 7 days. When we're talking about the duration of ventilation, it is a high pressure and high FiO2 ventilation, not the whole duration of ventilation as such. Results would be better if they can be placed on ECMO within 3 days, as soon as possible, but within 3 days. But the longer they tend to spend time on ventilator by going through the ventilator injury, there are higher chances of fibrosis, lung fibrosis happening at this period, and the recovery will be delayed or not possible. Generally, case of VV ECMO are maintained on ACTs, activated clotting time of around 160 to 180. This is a measure which we tend to do bedside. Chest physiotherapy is essential. Proning the position, proning the patient will be helpful in the recovery process. We tend to diurese the patient to the dry body weight. Once the adequate flow is achieved and adequate saturations are achieved, we tend to come down on the ventilator settings, keep on minimal ventilator settings, and at times we tend to extubate the patient as well. That's what I call it as awake ECMO. Comfort of the patient is maintained, but the patient should be able to communicate with the family and with physicians, etc. in selective cases. Early enteral nutrition is the key to success too, and infection control is of paramount importance. So when the lungs get better as a result of rest being given to the patient, tissue oxygenation being left, secretions are taken off through chest physio, bronchoscopy, etc. Once these mechanisms are done and the lungs are back to recovery, then at a ventilatable position, we tend to take the cannulae out, and that procedure is called as decannulation. So roughly, when the blood gases, chest X-ray improves, flow and FiO2 can be weaned, and the patient should reach a ventilatable parameter setting, moderate settings. Then we take the cannulae out. Sometimes we're seeing the need for second ECMO cannulation as well. If the patient deteriorates once again, re-ECMO is possible. These are my references, and if there are any questions, I am very happy to answer.